Welcome to the Changing Rhythms podcast. I'm Rebecca.
And I'm Bethany.
This podcast explores life's changing rhythms, and this season is all about parenthood. Today, we're talking about expectations in parenthood, what we expected before becoming parents, and what we've learned to expect. So first, let's start out by talking about feeding and sleeping. Bethany, just to give the audience a little understanding of where you're coming from, what's your experience with parenthood so far?
So I am the parent of a 20-year-old young man. So I've been through kind of all of the stages so far, and I'm learning to adapt to having an adult child. It's very strange for me. So.
Yeah, it's definitely a new take on things. And I just had my firstborn daughter in July of 2020. So she is 16 months old. And I, before that, have taken care of other people's children. So supported them in their parenting. But this is my first time parenting my own child. And we have had a lot of changes in every way, just having her introduced into our family, but already a lot to say about feeding and sleeping. And it's been a joy to watch her grow in all those areas. So to just describe her sleep routines from birth so far, we have been really fortunate to have a good sleeping baby. I'm a little embarrassed to talk about it with friends sometimes because, especially friends that have small children, they're like, "Oh, you're not sleeping at all at this point, are you?" And I'm like, "Oh no, actually, we're doing pretty well." And I'm grateful, but I know it could change at any time. And at the same time, I'm like doing everything I can to keep her on that schedule. So even from, I think, around 8 weeks, she was able to sleep through the night. Now, I assure you that didn't last like throughout the solid year and a half that we've had so far, but she had her sleep regressions, but generally we could expect her to go to sleep at a certain time and stay asleep until morning. And so it wasn't too much of a struggle in comparison to some others, but we've tried to keep that up by like having a sound machine that ticks on when it's approaching bedtime for her. Same thing for naps. And then also it has a sound where, the birds chirp when it's time for her to wake up. And we've always, I guess you could say it's like an alarm, but, we kind of watch her and know her tendencies and just try to go with her flow a little bit, but also guide her in the direction we want her to go. So teaching her and encouraging her to wake up at a time that's like a good family wake up time. That's always been a part of our process. Mm-hmm. And so now, and for the past, 6 months or so, she's been sleeping from about 6 p.m. till 7:30 or 8 a.m. And now she's down to one nap. She had been taking 2, but it's better than we expected. Since we're talking about expectations today, I have to admit sleep has gone much better than expected. And if we have another child, I'll have to be careful not to hold those expectations for that child because that's a different child, right? What's your experience with that? What do you think?
So again, I have to go back in my Rolodex 20 years, but Jacob also slept very well through the night. I think because I always had to get up and go to work at an early time, I don't think I ever noticed him waking up early because I had to be up early anyway. But I definitely don't recall him being up throughout the night. Like once he was down for the night, he was pretty much down until it was time for us to get up and get ready to leave. If he did wake up, he was generally quiet, so he could just, I don't want to say entertain himself, but he was okay with just laying in his crib until someone, came to get him. So even if he didn't sleep through the whole night, there definitely wasn't an issue of him waking up and him, wanting to be held or wanting, to be changed, he wouldn't cry for that. It was
Yeah.
just you would check him like, oh, you need to be changed, but he didn't. I too consider myself very fortunate. He did not cry a lot. I remember one time he was sick and he cried a lot, and I did not know what to do about that. But other than that, he just I was always very thankful that he was a happy baby. He didn't cry, you know, and he slept pretty pretty normally.
Well, that's lovely. And I'm glad that we both had similar experiences. But right, the expectation when you become a parent is that you're not going to get any sleep. Everything's going to go crazy. The house will be a mess. All of
Mhm.
those things, right? That's what I
Mhm.
heard and that's what I saw a lot of. But one thing that really taught me to have a different expectation was working with this one family in which the house was always spotless. Um, the food was always healthy. The people were always well rested. And I thought, like, how is this real life? But I was just stepping in to take care of the child while the parents were working. And so, but it opened my eyes and that changed my expectations for what it could be like to become a parent. I also learned from that mom that you can run while you're pregnant. You can run for exercise while you're pregnant. I had never heard of that before.
Mhm.
And then I did it. And so it was really cool to see how like my expectations of parenthood were based on my whole life experience and watching my parents until I saw something different and something that I
Mhm.
wanted to aspire to. And I think we've kind of found our footing for now. I don't want to ever talk like it's permanent because who knows what's going to happen.
Right.
Um, but we found our footing somewhere in between what I originally expected and what I came to realize was possible for us.
Yeah. But
Um,
isn't that just life in general, that you
mhm.
have the expectations that you're exposed to until you're exposed to something different,
Yes.
and then
Yes.
you realize you can want or have something different from what you've been exposed to.
Absolutely. And that's a beautiful thing that we experience to help us grow and change in life. It makes me so excited to think about it and what more I haven't been exposed to yet that will be a real
Mhm.
blessing going forward. So I want to ask you about sleep for Jacob as he grew, in childhood and adolescence, because I don't really know what to expect.
Mhm.
So just tell me whatever you can tell me about that time.
So again, in terms of sleeping, he had there was always a set bedtime. There was never a kind of stay up until you're ready. No, it's there's a set bedtime. And until he was, I want to say maybe in 5th grade, somewhere around there, his bedtime was 7. And then I think from maybe 5th grade to 8th grade, no, 5th grade to 7th grade, his bedtime was 8.
Mhm.
And then around 8th grade and 9th grade, it was 10. And then after 9th grade, I kind of, as much as I wanted him to still have a bedtime, it was harder to enforce,
Sure.
because he has activities and he's not a baby anymore. And, I'm not tired, I'll get up. And so the understanding was as long as you get up when you're supposed to for school, you know, then okay. But it was generally like around 11, I'm still kind of pushing you, hey, shouldn't you go to sleep? Don't you have to get up early? So there
Mhm.
wasn't a bedtime, but there was definitely encouragement to go to bed. Um, so yeah, but it definitely helped for him to have a routine,
Mhm.
because then just naturally he just gets sleepy at that time,
Yeah.
and it wasn't really a fight because this is just what time your body is used to winding down, you know.
Right.
Um, and there wasn't an issue because I know that there have been studies about screen time before bed, and he didn't have any electronic devices, so that really wasn't an issue.
Mm-hmm.
Having to figure out when to, at least when he was younger. Again, by the time he was in middle school, he did have a cell phone, but the rule was the cell phones stay downstairs. Like they
Mm-hmm.
don't go, even mine. We plug them in, we charge them downstairs, not in
Mm-hmm.
our rooms. And I think that helped just to go to sleep. There were no televisions in the room either. Your room was for sleeping. And so
Yeah.
I think that helped, you know, him just to go to sleep because that's what your room is for, is to go to sleep. So, yeah.
That sounds great. I mean, it sounds like the big takeaways are establishing a routine, because that kind of serves as a foundation, even when they start to make their own decisions about bedtime and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I love the structure of keeping devices out of the room. And just, yeah, it's establishing really healthy boundaries that can then, I think if he were to, or even if my daughter, if B was to start bringing her phone in her room, or buy herself a television when she's a senior in high school, she'll know, okay, this is the big change that I made that has
Mm-hmm.
now affected my sleep and my time and all those things. It makes it much more obvious when they explore their boundaries
Mm-hmm.
that these are the things that were kind of holding me in a good place before. So
Yeah.
that sounds really helpful. Thank you for sharing your experience. And let's talk too about our expectations for their feeding. So this is another thing where I grew up, I feel like we ate relatively healthily compared to those around us. But now as I look back on it, it wasn't that healthy, but it
Mm-hmm.
was practical for my
Mm-hmm.
parents raising 6 children all at one time. So like, I remember one thing my mom would do is like, she would buy Kellogg's Frosted Flakes, but then she'd also buy regular corn flakes and
Mm-hmm.
mix them together in a different container. And that's what
Mm-hmm.
we would pour out of for our cereal. So that they're not so sugary.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of a good representation in my mind of where we landed when it came to eating. It was an effort. There was an effort made to pursue health, but it was also kind of a what will they eat situation.
Mm-hmm.
And another example is my dad always pretended to like his vegetables, but he did not like them. And we didn't know when we were very little kids. And then as we got older, he admitted that to us. And we were so surprised because he always set the example of eating his vegetables as if they were the best thing on earth.
Mm-hmm.
And that served us so well. But we came to start asking questions like, does anyone like lima beans? Like things like that came up. That was a big deal to us. So yeah, my expectations were you eat what you're given, you finish your food, and you can complain about it, but you're still going to have to eat it. Stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it served me well. But I then found, as I got older and started taking care of other people's children, there is not always that expectation that kids will eat what you give them. And there are a lot of kids that just don't eat vegetables. And I was shocked. And I remember working with this one family, and one of the little girls was telling me she was not going to eat her carrots. And I said, well, yes, you are. What do you mean? You sit and you eat. She threw a tantrum. I sent her to her room. When I came to talk to her about what happened, she said that I was the only one who ever made her eat her vegetables. And I was like, wow, I didn't even know I was going against the grain here.
Mm-hmm.
But my expectation was rocked. But this time, I did not aspire to be like what I found was out there in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So with B, we've certainly landed on, letting her try lots of foods, giving her the vegetables that we eat, and she usually loves them. Like one time we were getting ready to eat lunch and I was telling her we're going to have chicken and veggies, and she said, "Yay, veggies!" And this is a girl who can't say that many words yet, but she was so excited, and I was like, "Yes, something good came out of this struggle of, making sure there are vegetables in front of her every day." So that's something that we really focus on doing, eating vegetables in front of her and with her, and giving her the exposure to learn to love them. And that's different from my expectations and different from what I learned other people were doing, but it's working well so far. Mm-hmm. What's your experience like?
Oh, vegetables.
Yeah.
So they were definitely much easier when he was eating baby food, because if he didn't like it, okay, well, you mix it in with a little something sweet. Like if he didn't like the green beans, okay, so you mix a little plums with it and he'll eat it. But as he got older, yeah, he was a picky eater. But it wasn't just vegetables. He didn't really like meat. And I found out later, it was more the texture, like he didn't like having to chew it. So it was just hard trying to find what he would eat, because it wasn't a matter of, I don't like vegetables. It was like, I don't like, this in general, so it got to the point where, and it's funny because years later, okay, so it got to the point where I would just fix really simple one pot meals, usually with ground beef, right? So that's chili, that's spaghetti, there are no vegetables there. And I didn't really make a point of, stressing the vegetables. If we had them, we had them. If we didn't, we didn't, because, I'm trying to make sure he will eat something.
Yeah.
But then later, when he was older, he was in high school, and I fixed like a full meal once, and he ate everything. And he was like, "I didn't know you could cook like this." And I said, "It's not that I couldn't cook, but you wouldn't eat it. So why should I cook what you're not going to eat?" And so now when I grew up, that definitely was not the thing. It was definitely whatever I fix, that's what you eat or you don't eat. I'm not going to make you eat it, but that's what there is to eat. You make that choice. But because he just wouldn't eat food in general, it wasn't like, well, he'll eat, it wasn't like he'll eat everything on his plate but vegetables. It was like he might not eat anything on his plate. Like he doesn't like chicken. He doesn't like, steak. He doesn't like fish. He does, there was so much that he just did not want to eat, you know. And so when I found something he would eat, that's kind of all I would fix, because okay, he's going to eat it.
Right.
So yeah. As he got older, that did not really change again until he was in high school or later. And by then, like, I didn't really cook that much. We ate out a lot, not a lot of vegetables. I'm not very proud of it, but it's just the truth of, leaving the house very early, coming home late. I don't feel like cooking anything. We're going to grab something on the way home. You can eat it in the car, or you can eat it when you get home, or whatever. So yeah, there were many years of bad eating, and trying to kind of break that habit now. And so I do fix vegetables. He'll eat broccoli sometimes, but I'll have to say, "Hey, don't you want to eat some broccoli with that? Hey, I don't see any vegetables on your plate. Hey, are you?"
Yeah.
But just on his own, he's not going to eat vegetables. I will say, my mom did not make us eat things that she didn't eat. And it's funny because lima beans was something she didn't eat. So we never had to eat lima beans. We'd never had to eat Brussels sprouts. And what else? Peas, sweet peas. We never had to eat those either because she didn't eat those,
Yeah.
and so there was cabbage, there was greens, there was broccoli, carrots, cauliflower. That was kind of green beans, and that was kind of it. I didn't really
Yeah.
discover like zucchini or squash until much later in life. Like, oh wow, this is good. I've never
Mm,
had these things,
yeah.
you know.
No, that totally makes sense. And I feel like there's a certain point where, your expectations are what they are, and then you have to do what you can do to feed your child. And you don't always have the option of reasoning with them or teaching them what nutrients are. It's just about getting food in their bodies today. So that same family where the little girl didn't want to eat her carrots, the kids always requested, if I were making a meal, buttered noodles. And I was just perplexed. Like, of all the things in the world that you could eat, butter on noodles, it seems so plain and boring to me. But
Hmm.
I've come to understand that's sometimes all that a kid wants, and there's no surprise in it. There's no like, weird texture um or intense flavor to kind of jar them. And
Hmm.
it's very satisfying for a lot of children. So I've come to understand and appreciate it more. But my expectations were all from this place of, well, we've got to eat what, gives us fuel for our bodies. And it just didn't occur to me to think another way. And yes, I'm embarrassed to admit that I've been so rigid in my thinking about food, but I've opened my mind a bit. And with B, I'm glad that she likes vegetables today, but she might not like them in another few months as she continues to grow and change. And so I'm trying to prepare myself
Hmm.
for the possibility that we might have to get more creative, or she might need to take a break and figure out what's most important,
Hmm.
um, in a given day as far as her food intake. But it's funny that you mentioned lima beans too, because okay, I'm reading this book called Easy Beans by Jackie Freeman, and it's like a funny book. She's very funny. She's a humorous chef, but it has lots of recipes as well about easy beans. And she mentions different facts about different types of beans, and lima beans apparently have some level of cyanide in them naturally. And I felt so justified when I read that, because I was like, that's why they're nasty. No one wants to eat poison. But if you cook them a certain way, they're safe to eat. It's fine. But my mom really likes lima beans. And that's one thing I just can never understand about her. We can see eye to eye on lots of things, but lima beans, and it was peas in particular that my dad did not like, but he pretended to, so that we would eat
Hmm.
ours. And I actually like Brussels sprouts, but I
Mm.
found that I'm one of the few people that do, it seems. Another child that I worked with, he loved his vegetables until he tried Brussels sprouts. And it was just the funniest moment. We usually sat on the floor to eat because I liked that. It was minimal mess. I could wipe the floor up as opposed to wiping up everything between his mouth and the floor if he was sitting in a high chair. And he would eat everything ravenously. And then the day he tried Brussels sprouts, he chewed and chewed as if he was going to swallow it, just like everything else. And
Hmm.
then he got this look on his face, and I was like, something's wrong. And he spit it out. And I thought, well, we've come to the end of the acceptable vegetables. But yes, the thing is, these things change as kids grow, and even as adults, as we changed perhaps
Hmm.
our priorities, but also the way that we're living our lives. Because, like you said, if you're on the go, if you're working all day, and you and Jacob come home and you don't feel up to cooking, of course you're going to get something from somewhere else. And now he's grown, and kind of grown, 20 years
Hmm.
old. I remember
Hmm.
that wasn't terribly long ago for me. Not quite grown, that's what I would have said about myself. But yeah, it's there's a lot that can change. And so I think it's really helpful to look at what our expectations were and what they are now. What would you
Hmm.
say that you expect for yourself, not so much as a parent but as a person, in terms of food and nutrition going forward?
I definitely, and this is because I've changed it recently, um, but I definitely expect to be more mindful of what I eat and
Mm-hmm.
why I'm eating it. Um, I definitely see the value in preparing your own food, um, and just that it doesn't have to be a chore. One of the many things that you have to do. Um, so yeah, and I found that I can cook, I just never enjoyed it. But I realized it was because it was one of the many things that I had to do. And I felt like, you know, it's not that important. If I can get food elsewhere, then that's one thing off of the list of things that I have to do.
Right.
Um, but since I don't have those, I don't know, those stresses anymore, and I don't have that long list of things that I still need to get done, I can take the time to think about what I'm going to cook, make sure I have all the ingredients, and just take my time in preparing it. Like I don't have to have it done in an hour. Like
Mm-hmm.
like I cook on Sundays for the whole week. Um, and I'll usually take maybe 4 or 5 hours because I just do a little at a time,
Mm-hmm.
and other people might not like it, but I do because I can clean, wash the dishes as I go. I can fix, maybe one item, take a break, go fix the next item, and it's manageable.
Yeah.
And again, it helps me to know what I'm eating, um, and just to have something more balanced so I can make sure I have vegetables, I have protein, I have some starch.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. So
Yeah.
that's hopefully I can keep it up. It's been good, this past month. So,
That sounds good. Yeah, I hope to do some more intentional and strategic meal prep myself in the coming months. I think this past year and a half, I've been like, well, this is all new. I don't have to do my absolute best to feed my family, but I want to try to make it good and healthy. But there are certain things that I've kind of let into our diet that I otherwise wouldn't have. And so
mm,
as Bee's getting a little bit older and more aware of what she's eating, I want to kind of switch from, being a little more lax to being really, really intentional if I can. And thankfully, Tim's here to help. Like he does the majority of our meal cooking, but we kind of work together to plan the meals. And
mhm,
then I do a lot of like the prep work in terms of chopping vegetables or, making sure that, like yesterday I made beans in the slow cooker, even though we didn't eat them yesterday, but they're for these coming days. And so we kind of have our systems and our strategies, but we're wanting to update those so we can make it sustainable as Bee gets older. And her appetite is huge. I'm just amazed by her ability to eat. But I have to keep in mind that whatever expectations I have for the next phase, especially as Bee is growing into those toddler years, that things will get busier. It's if she has activities, we're going to come up on those days where it's like no one has time or interest in cooking after all of that. And
mhm,
so we're ready to hopefully we're ready mentally to be prepared and approach those in a way that still lets us eat some of these healthy nutrients that we really enjoy, but also I want to have space in my mind to be graceful and let things be different from what I had hoped, perhaps. I'm afraid that's going to happen, and I just have to get on board with it. um,
yeah. That
so
that's
yeah,
that's parenting in a nutshell. Is you hope it goes one way, but you just kind of have to get on board for what actually happens.
I'm excited that we're friends, and you'll be walking with me on that journey to remind me of that. um, so let's move into the next area, expectations and parenting around routines and time. So you already kind of described Jacob's routines in terms of sleeping and having to get up for school. What else would you say about that process throughout his life and stages around chores or homework, meals, extracurriculars, or things like that?
Um, I think routines is really where you see kind of your family structure. And of course, every child has their own personality, right? But certain things they do because that's what they see being done. For example, I am hyper punctual. I cannot stand being late. And so Jacob in general is very punctual. Now, he's not as he's not as intense about it as I am. For me, punctual is being somewhere early. For Jacob, punctual is on time. And so but I had to get to the point where it's like, okay, no, he's going to be on time. I don't have to call him. I don't have to get him up. He's going, but I wasn't really sure because he wasn't my level of on time. But because I always, left with plenty of time to get somewhere or, started getting ready early enough, I don't like to rush. And so I think that has kind of been built into him.
Hmm.
So he's generally never in a rush. He doesn't allow as much time as I would, but he still allows himself enough time to do what he needs to do and get to where he needs to be on time.
Yeah.
So I think that's one of those things, if that's what they see, even if it's not to the same extent as that you would do it, that's generally what they're going to do.
Hmm.
Conversely, if you're more relaxed with time and you'll get there when you get there, that's probably how, your kids are going to be to some degree.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And that's a tricky one because I feel like you can have expectations about how you are with time or how you're going to be. And then there's a lot of times a different reality
Hmm.
because, especially for those of us who struggle with being late, it's not because we're planning on it, it's
Hmm.
because we think we're on top of it when we're not. And
Hmm.
so there's a lot of, I don't know, unspoken or even subconscious elements to dealing with time and routine. And I found that my expectations usually aren't aligned with my outcomes when it comes to time, especially getting somewhere on time, because I'm not fully aware of it. So that's another element to expectations that I'm exploring these days. But when it comes to fitting in things like chores, because even though B is a year and a half, she doesn't have any chores, but she does see me, like you said, she's following my example of cleaning and stuff. So we do cloth diapering, and I actually wash her diapers in a bucket in the bathtub. And I've, for the most of the time, I've been doing that. And she's been up, she's been awake. And so she's been
Hmm.
singing it. So recently she started to grab the diapers that I've wrung out and put them on the drying rack for me. I say
Hmm.
for me, but it's really not effective the way that she does it. Half the time they stay on the rack, half the
Hmm.
time they fall to the floor, but she can get it to go on the rack, and she knows that's the next step, and she's participating in that. I don't even know why I'm sharing that other than that it's a funny story and I really enjoy that she does that. But I'm thinking about it now in terms of her responsibilities as she gets older. Even though she's so little now, I do want to take advantage of the fact that she's thinking about, this is how we take care of our things. This is how we take care of our home, and maybe give her some responsibilities as she's able to do them. How did you handle that, and what expectations did you have?
Well, I'm going to say honestly, looking back, I wish I had handled it differently. But being a single parent, and I'm sure a lot of single parents understand the concept of it's just easier if I do it myself,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And while it's nice to, allow your small kids to help, when you have so much to do, it's just easier if you do it yourself. And so there were a lot of things that I probably could have and should have had Jacob do, but I just did it because it was easier, it was faster for me to do it myself, you know. Like I did have him pick up his toys, but I usually was picking them up with him as
Sure.
opposed to, no, you need to clean up. These are your toys. I didn't play with them. You need to clean them up. Um, Cleaning up after himself, even it's still a struggle even now.
Hmm.
You know, it's just because for so long I didn't make him do it that when I did start to ask, he was like, I don't want to do this. I mean, he'll do it, but it's after maybe I ask 2 or 3 times or, you know, like even now, it's his job to clean the living room on Fridays, and it's his job to clean the kitchen Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And I still have to be like, today's Friday. You
Yeah,
know, like you know what that means because if I don't, it won't get done. But to be fair, I was never really consistent in the expectation of um, him doing his chores.
sure.
Like I was definitely a pick your battle type of person, and that was not a battle that I wanted to have. It just was not important enough, you know. But again, in hindsight, I definitely should have been more consistent in the expectations because it wasn't that I didn't expect him to do it. It wasn't that, oh, he doesn't have to do it. It was just, this needs to get done instead of going, asking a million times. It's just easier if I do it. And I think he kind of knows, like, he can wait me out. Like if I don't do it, she'll eventually do it.
Sure. Yeah.
And because that's kind of what's been established, because that just was not a battle that I wanted. Again, I probably would have done it differently, but it is what it is now.
Yeah. I understand that. And I think, yeah, I can think of a child I worked with where their home was very neat, very put together all the time. And so one request the parents had of me was that toys not be all over everywhere at the end of the day. And so the easy solution to me was, okay, we're putting away the toys as soon as we're done playing with them. And the child learned that that was the expectation and he began to do it. Even as like, I would say, I'm going to go warm up your dinner, you put away your toys. And he's younger than 2, but he was able to do that because of that consistency. And so then my expectation and my intention was to do the same thing with B, but we have become lax about it. And she has picked up on that. And so now she feels free to like carry things, not just toys, but books, hair bows from one room to the other and just leave it there and then walk out the door. And I'm like, what is this? How did we get here? But I think, just as much as she picks up on the things we're consistent in, she picks up on the things we're not and
Hmm.
understands the level of importance based upon that, on the
Hmm.
consistency. And so it's been a little bit eye-opening to me. Um, it's easier for me to do things consistently when it's for someone else's sake. But when it's
Hmm.
for my own sake, which I feel like teaching her to clean up her toys every time or whatever the
Hmm.
case is, that's for me,
Hmm.
I don't have that same consistency or motivation, but I want to. I want to show up for myself the same way I have for others. Um, so that's one expectation in parenting that I'm figuring out how I feel about it and how we're going to continue to approach it.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I now that when you say that, that's exactly what it was. Because if it were for someone else, I would have made sure that it was done and done well. But since it was just for me, it was like, I'm not even going to worry about it. You know,
Yeah.
yeah.
Because it is about picking battles. And a lot of times with kids, it's like I have, so many other things to focus on right now. This doesn't feel like the most important thing. And truth be told, it's not always the most important, but it is foundational and it will make a difference in the long run. And
Hmm.
either add to or reduce the number of things I have to think about next time.
Mm-hmm.
So it's worth the effort and worth the prioritization if I can make that happen. But yes, just good things to be aware of as we live out our expectations and see what's reality. So when it comes to time and routines, chores, yes, interesting challenge there. But what about homework and meal times and extracurriculars? Did those things feel important to you to structure in terms of the time in the day that they happened?
Homework, yes. Meal times, no. Extracurriculars, it depended upon, like, that was a schedule that was already set. Whatever the extracurricular activity was, that was it was set based upon whenever it was scheduled, if that makes
Mm-hmm.
sense. And when I say meal times, it was because we didn't have a certain time that we ate every day, you know, because like I said, sometimes we'd be eating in the car, sometimes we get home at 8, sometimes we get home at 7. It just there just wasn't a set time, you know. And again, could I have changed that? I could have, in hindsight, because especially when he was younger, we got home based upon when I left work. I
Mm-hmm.
was a teacher. And so, yes, the school day ended at a certain time, but I rarely ever left when the school day ended. I was always at work another 2.5, 3 hours. And in my mind, that was helping me stay on top of my job. But at the same time, it was taking away from, my personal time. Like there was no work life balance. And so maybe if I had said, okay, I'm going to leave at this time every day, no matter what, so that we can have a common meal time, we would have had that. But honestly, it never occurred to me to do that because all I saw was I have all of these things that need to get done. The only way they're going to get done is if I stay at school and do them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah. But again, as Jacob got older, even that kind of changed because again, homework was, you know, if you didn't do it in the wherever you were, whether it was in an after school program or whatever, or sitting with me at my desk, um, then it was definitely done as soon as you got home. And if you say you already did it, then you need to sit it out so I can check it. Um, as he got older, I kind of had to trust him more
Mm-hmm.
to do, what he needed to do. Just because, again, he was in football, he was in track, he had, different activities. And so I couldn't say at this time every day you have to do your homework. I
Right.
just had to trust that your homework is done. And I would check his grades online. But again, it's like at this point, I'm having to let go some because at a certain point, you can't continue to check on your child the way you did when they were younger
Yeah.
because then they don't become independent and they don't learn to manage things for themselves.
Right.
If I know my mom's going to make sure my book bag is packed, that's okay for a second grader. That's not okay for a seventh grader.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but you have to, again, that has to be, and that was something that I was conscious of no, I have to let him start to take on some of these things because, you're going into the world, you're going to college, you're going to be adult, whatever. You have to be able to manage these things for yourself because I'm not going to ask you every day, do you have this? Do you have that? Like, again, second grade, yes. Seventh grade, no.
Right.
So,
Yeah, making those adjustments that are appropriate for the age and maturity level, right?
mhm.
Yeah. This concludes part 1 of our episode on expectations in parenthood. Come back for part 2 on the second Saturday of next month. We invite you, listener, to email us at changingrhythmspodcast@gmail.com with any comments. We'd love to hear from you. We look forward to exploring more with you, so keep listening and stay healthy and safe until then.